Before the world called him the Buddha, he was simply a man disturbed by a question most people spend their lives trying to avoid. Why does human suffering exist at all? This is void of context. Take a slow breath. Long before statues were built in his honor, before temples carried his name across Asia, before millions whispered his teachings in silence, there was only a restless young prince, a man surrounded by beauty, yet haunted by suffering. A prince who looked at luxury and saw a prison. And one night, he abandoned everything to search for a truth no king could control. If stories about forgotten wisdom and timeless minds fascinate you, subscribe now to journey deeper into history with Void of Context. In the ancient kingdom of Kapilavastu, near the foothills of the Himalayas, a child was born into wealth, prophecy, and expectation. His name was Siddhartha Gautama. His father was a king. His future seemed certain. Power, comfort, prestige, legacy. But before the boy could even understand the world, a prophecy began to follow him. Wise men visited the palace after his birth. They studied the child carefully. Some believed he would become a great ruler. Others believed something far more dangerous. They said the boy might abandon the world entirely, that he could become a spiritual teacher who would change humanity forever. His father feared the second possibility. A king could control armies, but he could not control ideas. So Siddhartha's father made a decision that would shape history. He would hide suffering from his son. The prince would never see pain, never witness sickness, never encounter death, never feel the harshness of ordinary human life. The palace became a beautiful illusion. Musicians played through the halls. Gardens bloomed endlessly. Silk covered the floors. Servants removed anything unpleasant before the prince could notice. Even aging people were kept away from him. The king believed happiness could be manufactured through comfort, and for many years, the illusion worked. Siddhartha grew into a thoughtful young man, gentle, intelligent, quietly observant. He married a princess named Yasodhara. He became a father. His life appeared complete. Yet somewhere beneath the surface, something restless remained alive inside him. Luxury answered every physical need, but it could not answer the deeper questions slowly forming in his mind. Why did joy feel temporary? Why did pleasure fade so quickly? Why did people fear silence? The palace was full of entertainment, but it was strangely empty of meaning. One day, Siddhartha convinced his attendants to let him leave the palace grounds. What he saw changed him forever. For the first time in his life, he saw an old man, bent spine, weak body, wrinkled skin, slow breathing. Siddhartha stared in confusion. He asked his servant what had happened to the man. The servant answered carefully, "This happens to everyone who lives long enough." The prince was shaken. Not long after, he saw another sight. A sick man. The man coughed painfully. His body trembled. He looked trapped inside his own suffering. Again, Siddhartha asked questions. Again, the answers disturbed him. Then came the third encounter. A funeral procession. A lifeless body carried through the streets while grieving voices echoed behind it. Death, the one truth his father spent years trying to hide. Siddhartha realized something terrifying. Everything he loved would disappear. Youth would vanish. Health would vanish. Life itself would vanish. The palace suddenly felt fragile, artificial, like a dream waiting to collapse. But then came the fourth encounter, a wandering holy man. The man owned almost nothing, yet his face carried unusual peace. He did not look trapped by fear. For the first time, Siddhartha saw someone searching for answers instead of distractions, and something awakened inside him. The prince returned to the palace, but internally, he had already left. Music no longer comforted him. Luxury felt heavy. Pleasure seemed temporary and powerless against suffering. At night, while the kingdom slept, Siddhartha looked at his wife and newborn son one last time. Then he made a choice that still echoes across history. He walked away, away from power, away from wealth, away from identity itself. The prince cut his hair, removed his royal clothing, and stepped into the unknown as a wandering seeker. Many later called this moment noble, but it was also heartbreaking. He abandoned everything familiar, not because he hated life, but because he desperately wanted to understand it. For years, Siddhartha searched across northern India. He studied under spiritual teachers, learned meditation, practiced discipline, explored philosophy, but nothing fully satisfied him. Then he turned toward extreme asceticism. He believed perhaps freedom could only come through complete denial of the body. So he starved himself. Day after day, he ate almost nothing. His ribs became visible. His body weakened. Some stories say he became so thin he could touch his spine through his stomach. The young prince, who once lived among silk and gold, now sat in dust and pain. And still, the answers did not come. One day, exhausted and close to death, Siddhartha realized something profound. Suffering alone was not wisdom. Extreme pleasure had failed him. Extreme suffering had failed him too. Truth, perhaps, existed somewhere between both extremes. This became the beginning of what he later called the middle way, a path of balance, awareness, discipline without self-destruction. Soon after, Siddhartha accepted a simple bowl of food from a village woman. Some fellow ascetics were disgusted. They believed he had abandoned spiritual purity. But Siddhartha no longer cared about appearances. He was searching for truth, not approval. Then came the night that changed history. Near the town of Bodh Gaya, Siddhartha sat beneath a fig tree that would later become known as the Bodhi tree. He made a quiet promise. He would not rise until he understood the nature of suffering. The night grew darker. Silence surrounded him. Ancient stories describe spiritual temptations appearing before him. Fear, desire, illusion, doubt. Whether literal or symbolic, the meaning remains powerful. The greatest battle was happening inside his own mind. And slowly, through deep meditation, Siddhartha began to see clearly. He saw how human beings endlessly chase temporary pleasures, how attachment creates suffering, how fear controls behavior, how desire never fully satisfies the heart. He understood that pain was unavoidable, but endless psychological suffering was not. Before dawn, something inside him transformed completely. Siddhartha Gautama became the Buddha, the awakened one. But what made the Buddha extraordinary was not supernatural power. It was clarity. He did not promise immortality. He did not claim humans could escape pain entirely. Instead, he taught something both simple and revolutionary. Much of human suffering comes from attachment. Attachment to identity. Attachment to control. Attachment to desire. Attachment to things that constantly change. People suffer because they demand permanence from an impermanent world. The Buddha began teaching across villages and kingdoms. He spoke to kings and farmers, rich merchants, and forgotten outcasts. Unlike many spiritual traditions of his time, his teachings were deeply human. He encouraged questioning, observation, personal understanding. He taught compassion not as weakness, but as wisdom. He believed anger poisoned the mind carrying it. He believed peace could not grow from hatred. He believed awareness was more powerful than blind belief. And perhaps most importantly, he understood the restless nature of the human mind. Even today, thousands of years later, his observations still feel painfully modern. People still chase endless pleasure, still fear aging, still avoid silence, still build identities around temporary things. Technology changed, empires collapsed, civilizations rose and disappeared, but human anxiety remained strangely familiar. The Buddha spent decades teaching. He walked from town to town with calm patience. He created communities of followers. His words spread slowly across Asia and eventually across the world. But despite becoming one of history's most influential figures, he remained remarkably humble. He did not call himself a god. He simply believed awakening was possible for ordinary people willing to truly observe themselves. Near the end of his life, the Buddha grew old. The prince who once feared aging eventually became an old man himself. And there is something deeply human about that. Even the man who sought truth could not escape time. But perhaps that was the point all along. Wisdom was never about escaping reality. It was about understanding it clearly. When the Buddha finally died, his teachings did not disappear with him. They crossed mountains, kingdoms, languages, centuries, and somewhere in the modern world, inside crowded cities and glowing screens, people still return to his ideas, searching for peace. Not because suffering vanished, but because he dared to face it honestly. The story of Buddha is not simply about religion. It is about a human being who refused to remain asleep inside comfort. A man who looked directly at suffering and asked the question most people avoid: how should we live? Knowing everything eventually fades? Maybe that question is why his story still survives. Because deep inside, many people still feel what the young prince once felt inside the palace, surrounded by distraction, yet quietly searching for meaning. And perhaps the truth Siddhartha discovered beneath the Bodhi tree was never meant only for monks or philosophers. Perhaps it was meant for anyone brave enough to slow down, observe themselves honestly, and accept the fragile beauty of being human. Thank you for watching Void of Context. History is filled with conquerors, kings, and empires. But sometimes, the people who change humanity most are the ones who walk away from power entirely. And perhaps that is why the Buddha still feels timeless. Because in a noisy world, obsessed with more, his life quietly asked a different question. What if peace begins when we stop running? Leave a comment below with the historical figure whose story should come next. And next time, we journey into the life of a philosopher whose ideas shaped the foundations of Western thought itself.